Thank you very much. It's nice to be with you. Whenever I do something, I always want to find out who I'm speaking to. I know there's a couple of Purdue people in the crowd. Over here, yeah. I'll see you later. You got a jersey? I'll get it. I went to Purdue. Anybody from IU here? Those are the ones that couldn't get into Purdue. Any Jet fans here? They said, you're going to be the keynote speaker, the opening keynote speaker. You know, you got 40 minutes. So I'm going to come around and I'm going to give you a 5-minute warning when it gets to 35 minutes. I said, I'm a shy, introverted, small-town kid from Evansville, Indiana. I couldn't talk 40 minutes if you had a gun, if you had people ready to shoot me. I was begging for my life. So I don't think we're going to need that. What we're going to do, though, is have a little fun, maybe put some smiles on your face. I have not gotten to meet before this weekend the Consolidated Graphics people, and had dinner with some of them last night, and was very impressed. How can you not be impressed walking into this hotel? Everything you see, all the people that you see with Emerge, the airport. I didn't know who or what Emerge was, and I kept asking and asking until I got over here, and now I see what it is and why it works. The 70 companies that are represented out here. I didn't know anything about Consolidated Graphics, but I know a lot about them now, and I'm very impressed. People ask me as I walk around out here about some of my career. And let me just touch on this very quickly. Some of the highlights of my career, people always ask me, you know, what about your son Brian? Well, I played with the Dolphins for 15 years. And I was playing for Purdue for 4 years. The highlights of my playing career, certainly were the Rose Bowl when we went to Purdue. When you grow up in the Midwest, they don't talk about winning the Big Ten championship. They don't talk about winning a national championship. They talk about winning the Big Ten championship and going to the Rose Bowl. Purdue had never been to the Rose Bowl before I got there. So we went my senior year there. That was a career highlight. And then when I went to the Dolphins, going to the Super Bowl and winning it 2 out of 3 times, that was a highlight. Those were my playing highlights. But you talk about my broadcasting highlights, and it can be only one thing. And a lot of people have come up to me every time I go into a group like this. People will always come up and mention the Rose Bowl that Keith Jackson and I did. Everybody know who Keith Jackson is? I take it for granted, yeah. That Keith Jackson and I did the Rose Bowl game that my son Brian played in. And Michigan, he went to Michigan. He couldn't get into Purdue either. And I remind him of that every time he's with me, yeah. But anyway, the highlight of my broadcasting career was at the end of that Rose Bowl game when Brian's team, Michigan, beat Washington State and won the national championship. Brian had a good game, and Keith is near the end of the game. Keith says, "Oh, Nelly, you want to know who the MVP is? I'm standing right next to his proud daddy." And Keith said, "It's all right, kid. talking to me. He says, all right, kid, you just go ahead and cry. He says, I'll finish out the rest of the game. I had the opportunity to work with two legends in my time, Coach Don Shula with the Dolphins and Keith Jackson in broadcasting. I was telling the story last night. Keith Jackson and I are doing the first SEC championship game in Birmingham, Alabama. It's Florida and Alabama. It's 15 seconds to go in the game. Florida is behind by like 5 points. Florida is moving. They're about on the 10-yard line, and this is the last play of the game. And the quarterback gets the ball, and he drops back to pass, and he's pressured in the pocket, so he scrambled over to the right, and he reverses pivot, and he comes back over this way, and there's a man in the back of the end zone, and the quarterback makes a throw and throws it all the way to the back of the end zone. The receiver is covered, throws it over the defender, hits him right in the hands, and he drops the ball. So after Keith does his thing and telling, who's playing, who's dropping, and who does other thing, I come on and I'm saying, Keith, that quarterback made a great play. He scrambled around, bought some time, rolled to his left, threw across his body, over the defender, into the back of the end zone, hit the guy right in his hands. He's got to make that play. This is national television on a Saturday night, prime time. Keith lets my comments go quiet for like 10 or 15 seconds on national television. And he comes back and says, if you're a lonely soul out on the highways of America, with only the coyotes howling, and you heard that comment, you'd know it came from a quarterback. Oh, Keith, I love him. I don't get me started on Keith Jackson's stories and things, but there was a one game. It was Florida State and Florida. They were going back and forth, touchdowns, long passes, kickoff returns, punt returns. In the end of the first quarter, it's 21-17, and he goes to commercial. He says, "Oh, Nelly, they're hot today. The barn's on fire, and they're taking a couple rows of the cornfield." I said, "Keith, where do you get this stuff?" He said, "Griese," he says, "I was born on a farm in the state of Georgia." He says, "I had a lot of, farm tools and animals that he looked at every day." So that's exactly where all that came. And Coach Shula, both these guys are still doing well. They're still alive in their 80s. I see Coach Shula a lot. We're much better friends now than we used to be when he was the coach and I was the player. But before, anybody from Baltimore here? All right. So Coach Shula was in Baltimore before he came to the Dolphins. Thank you for allowing him to leave. The year before Don Shula came to the Miami Dolphins, we were 3-10-1. The first year that he was with us, we were 10-4. We were 10-4. Three of the first 4 years Coach Shula was there, we went to the Super Bowl. 3 of the first 4 years. And you think coaching doesn't make a difference? And one of those years, we had an undefeated season, 1972. Coach Shula was there. So you talk about a guy that makes a difference. It's Coach Shula. They asked me to draw some parallels. I said, "What do you want me to talk about?" I said, "Well, there's a lot of parallels in sports and in business." Sure, I understand that. There's teamwork and leadership and all this other good stuff. And then, for instance, in the NFL, the NFL has owners and general managers, and in business, the owners are the shareholders. The general managers are the CEOs. I mean, this is a rough comparison. The head coach might be a senior corporate leadership. Quarterbacks might be the company president. And then the guys that do all the work, the players, that could be the company staff. Some of the things, and I'm going to mention a bunch of things, and then I'm going to go back and talk about a couple of them. Teamwork, leadership, setting goals, overcoming adversity, communications, commitment, experience. You got to have experience. And there's many more. And there's many more. And I'm sure as I was reading off some, and these are just a few that I wrote down, because I want to go back and talk about a couple of them. Teamwork, for instance. Coach Shula showed what teamwork does for a team. In 1970, before he came, we were a bunch of players, a bunch of pretty well talented. We had some talent, but not. When he came in and put that team together, and in 1972, we went undefeated. The only team in the history of the National Football League that has ever gone undefeated. Now, no team had done it before 1972, and no team had done it after that. And when we went undefeated, after the Super Bowl, we were in a locker room, we were happy. We'd gotten beat the year before by the Dallas Cowboys. Anybody here from Dallas? So all we wanted to do in 1972 was get back to the Super Bowl and win it. And so when we went undefeated, we didn't say, hey, we went undefeated, look at this. We said, we won the Super Bowl. We are the champions. We don't have to play another game, but we thought somebody else, going undefeated was secondary. We thought somebody else would do it. Maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers won the championship, won the Super Bowl 4 times in the 70s and never went undefeated. Then the great teams of the Cowboys, and then the San Francisco 49ers and the New England, almost. None of them has gone undefeated. And so we started thinking, well, maybe that was something special. So the guys that we had on that team, there's only 5 guys off of that team that are in the NFL Hall of Fame, off of an undefeated team, the only in the NFL history. So what I'm getting back to is the fact that where there wasn't talent, there was teamwork. I would have never gotten into the Hall of Fame, any Hall of Fame, without Coach Shula and the teamwork. And there's a lot of guys on that team, Larry Little and Jim Langer, Paul Warfield. Paul Warfield would probably have gotten in. Nick Bonaconte on the defense. But teamwork is first and foremost. Leadership. Coach Shula's leadership. I'll tell you a story. First Super Bowl we're in, we're playing the Dallas Cowboys right here in New Orleans. All week, the weather is great. On game day on Sunday, it is colder than it's in the 20s. And we're playing in the old stadium, in Tulane Stadium. So one of the plays I call the plays was supposed to be a quick pass. It's called split right, 80, all slant. Okay, so I take the ball. It's a 3-step drop. You're smiling like you already know what's going on here. So everybody runs a slant and then keeps going. Well, I take 3 steps and I'm supposed to throw it. Well, there's a defensive lineman that slips the block of our offensive guy and he's right in my face. Okay? So back then, I was a pretty good scrambler. I mean, I could run around. In fact, when Coach Sheila came to the Dolphins, he said to the media, yeah, I like that young quarterback we got, but I'd like to keep him in the pocket a little bit more and not have him run around so much. And I told Sheila when I had my first meeting, I said, you give me a pocket to stay in and I'll stay in it. So anyway, I take 3 steps back and I start to throw and there's no lane to throw. So I run this way, start scrambling, and I reverse back. All right, I'm going to go over here because now the defensive end from over here is coming. The defensive tackle's coming here, and the end's coming there because the ball's supposed to be gone. Now I'm just trying to look for somebody to throw it away to, get it close to. So I'm circling back and get sacked. 29-yard sack. It's the only record I still hold in the Super Bowl. So I go to I call timeout. Now it's 3rd and 39. And Coach Sheila, he always wanted to be an offensive guy. He was a defensive cornerback when he played. But he always sat in the offensive meetings during the week. So I walked over there and I grab a towel and I'm toweling off and I'm drinking water. And Coach Sheila usually let me breathe half the time out. And then he says, he always says, what do you like? What do you like, Bob? What do you like? I said, he says, I don't know, Coach. I said, you always wanted to call plays. I'll let you call this one, 3rd and 39. I'll never forget the words that came back. He said, and this is a Super Bowl, I'm busting my butt. He says, oh no. He said, you got us into this mess, you get us out of it. But you talk about leadership, teamwork. When he came to the Dolphins, we had it. Setting goals. Short-term goals were just win the game this week. Long-term goals, win the Super Bowl. After we won that Super Bowl, Sheila said, all right, now we got to go back to back. I'll never forget in the locker room after we won the Super Bowl, he didn't mention going undefeated that year. We went 17-0. He says, all right, now we got to prove that this wasn't a fluke. We got to validate this. The motto for next year was back to back. It's on the ring, back to back. And on the undefeated the Super Bowl 72, unbeaten is on there as well. Overcoming adversity. I'm sure a lot of you were thinking right now of people in your business, in your companies. Maybe you yourselves have overcome adversity. The one example that I want to tell you about is we had a running back by the name of Mercury Morris. Is there anybody from Miami here? Okay. You remember a guy named Mercury Morris? You remember Mercury? He was a short little running back. He was about 5'9", and he weighed about 100 and, I don't know, what do you weigh, 180 pounds? He was fast as lightning, but he wasn't very good at catching the football or blocking. So every time I had him in the game, you were either going to give him the ball and let him run, or you couldn't throw it to him and you couldn't ask him to block. So anyway, I got stuck with him. Let me just get to the point. I got stuck. We're playing the Baltimore Colts This was before the Colts left and went to Indianapolis. You guys from Baltimore, do you remember a guy named Bubba Smith? For the rest of you, Bubba Smith was a defensive end who was 6'8" and weighed about 300 pounds and didn't like to get blocked. I had to play against him at Michigan State as well in the NFL at Baltimore. So anyway, we're playing the Baltimore Colts. We're talking about overcoming adversity, all right? And we're talking about Mercury Morris, short guy, can't block, come to the line of scrimmage against the Colts, and Bubba's over here on the end, and Mercury's in the backfield. Now, we're going to have our tackle block Bubba because he's so big. But if the linebacker blitzes inside, then the lineman, the tackle has to come down, and the end man on the line is free, and the back has to step up and block. You know, we're doing this during the week. You know, we got X's and O's. And so they do this, and they show us how to do it. If this X comes this way, that's the linebacker, then this guy is free. Now, it's just a little X on the board, but out there in real life, it's 6'8", and it's 300 pounds, and it's angry, and it doesn't want to get blocked. And in the film room during the week, this little O back here can step up and block that X. So I get sacked about 3 times the first half. We go back into halftime, and I said, Merck, you got to block that guy when you're in there. He said, and the coach came over, and we're all talking. He says, okay. He says, what do I do? You know, Mercury, he wanted to succeed. I said, Merck, I said, you're blocking him too high. He's 6'8". Merck's about 5'8". You block him down low around his knees. He says, those defensive linemen, they don't like to get hit around their knees. Okay. So we go out the second half. Call a play in the huddle. He's in there. First time he's in there, I got to call a play. So it's a pass play. I come up the line of scrimmage, and I know what's happening. I can see it. The linebacker's going to come inside in the same situation. He's going to be free on Merck. But Merck's got the thing, so we go. So I said, set, and we go back, and linebacker blitzes inside. Bubba's coming free. Mercury steps up, hits him right at his knees. He goes end over end and lands right on me. Well, he's not too happy. First time he'd been blocked all day. I'm walking back to the huddle right past Bubba. Mercury's there, and Bubba grabs a hold of Mercury's jersey and says, boy, he said, you do that again, I'm going to bite your head off. Mercury had a way with words. He looked up at him and he said, Bubba, he said, you do that, you'll have more brains in your stomach than you have in your head. Overcoming adversity. I love this one. Communications. You got to have communications. It's the backbone of any company, any huddle, any sport, any team. We're in the Super Bowl in Houston. Yeah, Houston at Rice Stadium. We're playing the Vikings. This is the 3rd Super Bowl of the 3 that we were in. Playing the Vikings. We get the opening kickoff, and we march it right down the field. We're on the 4-yard line. We got 80,000 in the stands, 80 million watching at home, and we're just moving right down the field. And I said, okay, here we got in the huddle, 1st and goal on the go. I alert the guys in the huddle. I said, be alert now. I may have to check this play off because that year, the Vikings used 2 different types of goal line defenses. And we couldn't come up with any play that was good against both of those defenses. So I said, no, be alert, I may have to check this play off. Here's the play. It's Brown left near close, 18 straight, on 1, ready break. I'm walking up to the line of scrimmage, and as any good quarterback, I'm saying, all right, if they're in that other defense, what am I going to check to, okay? I'm saying, all right, if they're in that defense, I'm going to check this way over here. All right, the line gets down, and they're in the defense that's good for the play I've got called. So I've got a problem. I forgot the snap count. That happens a lot. You'd be surprised how often that happens. I forgot the snap count. I was thinking, so I said 80,000. I don't want to call timeout. 80,000 here, 80 million watching at home. If I call timeout, dumb quarterback forgot the snap count. I said, I'll outfox him. I'll turn around and ask Larry Zonka, our big fullback. He was a big fullback out of Syracuse. I asked him the snap count. So I very casually said, hey, Zonk, what's it on? Zonk had his head down counting the blades of grass in the artificial turf. When they move, he moves. He was supposed to get the ball. So he says, it's on 2. So Jim Kick, the halfback, is in there, and right next to him. So I turn around and I say, okay. And so I said, set, 390. And I'm going through my cadence, and Jim Kick turns over to Zonk and says, Zonk, it's on 1. Now I look over to my offensive line, my tight end, his helmet's turning. What's it on? What's it on? What's it on? I didn't have much time left, so I set 390, 390, hut! And the ball came up on 1, as it should have. Nobody moved. The Vikings, they didn't move either. They thought it was on 2 as well. Communications, not good. After that, we set up a different way of communicating. The center and I, I'll tell you very quickly, we either went on first sound or second sound, or 1, 2, or 3. So I told Langer, the center, I said, Jim, if I ever get in that situation again, I'm just going to holler out, what's it on? I don't care if the defense. And if it's on first sound or second sound, just say A or B. First sound is A, second sound is B. Or if it's red, 1, 2, or first, second, 1, 2, or 3 cadence, just say red, white, or blue. And that was all we did. So we solved that communications problem after a critical time in a Super Bowl game. Thankfully, it didn't cost us. Experience. You know as well as I, in business, you got to have good young talent come in, just like the NFL has the draft coming up, good young quality talent coming up, but you got to have some experience. You got to have a nice blend of new talent, young talent, and experience. And we had that on those championship teams with the Dolphins. I'll tell you one more story. Experience. I didn't have it. When I left Purdue and was drafted by the Dolphins in the first round, the first week I was there with the Dolphins, and we're talking about Miami in the 60s. Miami in the 60s, the Orange Bowl in August, preseason games, okay? We're talking about my first start in a preseason game against one of the most intimidating linebackers of all time. Now, tell me who this is when I tell you back in the 60s, intimidating middle linebacker, Chicago Bears. Dick Butkus. Yeah, you laugh. You didn't have to face him. So here I am just a rookie out of Purdue. Butkus had gone to Illinois. We had played each other before. So he was out there yelling and screaming and cursing. Why do I have to play in this hot game against you, rookie from Purdue? He says, I intercepted you at Purdue. I do the same thing. He's going on and on and on and on. So I always like to look at the linebackers. Well, I'm right here. Here's the center, and he is right here. This is my first pro game. I don't have any experience. he has got a lot of experience. So I just kept my head down. You know, I'd call the play, we'd come to the line of scrimmage, the line would get down, and I'd just see that he was right here. They played a 4-3, and he was right there in front of me. And that worked fine. So we go in at halftime. They said, you're playing the second half. You would get out. So I said, all right, they'll probably put their second team in, the Bears. And we come out, so we get the ball, we break the huddle, and we come up the line of scrimmage, and there he is. He's still in the game. So I'm doing this again. I'm saying, well, I wish he wouldn't. So we break the huddle, and Zonka's got a problem. He said, Bob, he says, what's the snap count? Zonka. So I'm turning around, and I'm talking to Zonka, and I said, line up, you get over here, you line up here. You know, the play is a 14 trap. I said, and it's on one. So I'm doing this again. I'm not looking at Butkus. First play of the second half. So I noticed that Butkus is not right here. He's one man over. So I'm saying, oh, they changed defenses. They're trying to fool this rookie quarterback with no experience, you know. So I put my hands under what I thought was my center. It was my right guard, Larry Little. I had just gotten there that week. He didn't know me from Adam. He jumps about 6 feet in the air. He said, what you doing, rookie? You got to have experience. And there's only one way to get it. You just have to go through it. Everybody has formulas for success. You know, companies, teams, individuals. My formula for success was three things. Very quickly, very simply, preparation. I wasn't the tallest or the best, strongest or the quickest or anything else. I got to be where I got to be by being prepared, watching film, studying the film during the week, practicing during the week in practices. I could tell that a team was going to be in a certain type of defense just by the alignment of the strong safety, or a lot of times the cornerbacks will be inside technique versus outside technique. And I found this my first year in the NFL, that if you watch enough tape, you know what they're going to be in. If you tell me which coverage you're going to be in, I know where I'm going to throw the ball, even before I get the snap. So preparation. And I like to say preparation breeds confidence. If you're prepared to play, if you're prepared for your interview, if you're prepared to go out there and succeed, you'll be confident. The second thing is execution. You can be as prepared as you want to be, but if you don't go out and perform, like we played the Jets one year, my rookie year, up in New York, and I was prepared. I was ready to play. It was the first time I was in Shea Stadium where they used to play. Shea Stadium was a baseball field. Winds were always howling for those of you Jets fans up there that have been in that stadium. And I didn't go out and I didn't play well. And I don't care how well you prepare, if you don't go out and execute, you still have to go out and play the game. You still have to go out and get it done. And I like to say, you play as you practice. You don't screw around and practice all week. You don't just laugh practice off Thursday, Friday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then say, oh, I got it, I'll have it on Sunday, or I'll have it when I need it in the meeting. You have to. One of our wide receivers, this was later on in my career when I was very experienced and he was a rookie. He came to me the night before a game on Saturday night and says, Bob, he said, I would like to come with you and get with you later on to go over the plays that you're going to call in the game tomorrow. And I said, Freddie, the plays that I've called all week in practice, all those plays are the ones that I'm going to call in the game. You play as you practice. If you practice well, you'll probably play well. And I don't call one set of plays. And the halfback came and says, what if they do the safety blitz? What are you going to do if they use the safety blitz? We went over that in practice. And the checkoff that I made, I still remember the numbers, 46 to the right, 47 to the left. If they hear 47, they're expecting a weak safety blitz. And we practice that. So you play as you practice. And lastly, sometimes they don't always go that way. Sometimes you don't always win. And there's losses to deal with. I'm never a good loser. I was never a good loser. But motivation. Motivation was one of my things. Sometimes you could be motivated by the fear of failure and the fear of losing. A lot of the times I wouldn't get myself up to win a game positively, but I'm saying, hey, I don't want to lose. I can't get myself motivated up to win this game, but I certainly don't want to lose it. And that's people get themselves up in different ways. I learned more from losing than I ever did from winning. Winning is what we were supposed to do. Sealing the deal is what you're supposed to do. Not getting it and not getting the win, you take that. I remember losing the Super Bowl, the first one we were into, the Dallas Cowboys. They threw a new defense at us that we weren't ready for. Now the next year we played the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas, and they used that same defense, and we killed them. We beat them. What do you think, we're not going to go back and study how we got beat and correct it because everybody else is going to try to beat you the same way? So I always learned more from losing than I did from winning. That's about it for me. I've talked enough. I probably won't talk for the next 2 days. You guys are on a great team. Consolidated Graphics. I want to wish you well the next 3 days. I'll be around later on, I think around noon or something, to sign autographs and answer some questions, but enjoy being with you. Have a great week, have a great convention, and we'll see you a little bit later. Thank you very much.